All right. Hi, everybody. It's a really windy, nice day out, and there's a lot of planes, trains, and automobiles, and wind. So I'm sorry for that. Living in the city, but I'm gonna just film the grass like I always do. Yeah, let's zoom in on the grass with my zoomy camera. I haven't made a video for a while, so I'm kind of getting warmed up here again, and it's that season where I like to sit outside and talk, but I am working on some stuff that I'm editing together, and I'm going to do some more work on mind control with this channel. And today I'm going to kind of start on that theme a little bit and talk about anxiety. And what inspired this talk is that, like, over the course of, I don't know, a while now, I mean, for a couple of years I've been really kind of putting more energy into working on my own biofield and the whole bridging the conscious and subconscious mind, and because they're not really separate, it's a feedback loop really between the two. And so I've been working on my own anxiety, and what I've noticed is that the biggest change that I've noticed as I've reduced anxiety tremendously, like, I'm not talking about, sometimes we have acute anxiety over some trigger issue, but then I was like, I've been thinking in general, as far as like general anxiety. A lot of people are even diagnosed with general anxiety disorder, and I'm sure certain times in my life I would definitely fall into that category, because it was like my life wasn't really going badly necessarily, but I was in constant total anxiety anyway. Like, I was just like, why am I so tense? And so over the last few years, and especially in the last 6 to 8 months, I've really been working on a lot of that kind of stuff. And what I've noticed the most is that I no longer have tension in my solar plexus. Like, my solar plexus is actually loose and relaxed now. And I went through years of having this chronic tension in my solar plexus, and I know that that's one of the biggest, bodily tells of anxiety is, like, you're going to have this tension around the rib cage, front and back, and really, like, the organs that are associated with and that are in that region, like the liver and the spleen. I mean, what takes more stress than the liver and the adrenals and kidneys are back there too, really. But really, the adrenals and the liver and the spleen, like, all are kind of those organs that I noticed were really affected by the tension of the musculature around that. So I really find, obviously, and I think everybody knows this, that anxiety oftentimes has a biochemical component. If you're demineralized, you're not getting enough B vitamins, you're not drinking enough water, blah, blah, blah. Really, potassium and magnesium are one of the biggest key factors in relaxing the muscles. So it's almost kind of like you get into this feedback loop of muscle tension, and that ends up sort of feeding into the anxiety. And so body work and eating right and drinking enough, blah, blah, blah. Obviously, we don't want to live in stressful situations and that kind of thing. But there's this, like, I don't know, I think there's just this chronic anxiety programming that's happening with everybody, and adrenal burnout is definitely epidemic because of it. A lot of people are having at least some adrenal fatigue symptoms, especially by the time they're like 35, 40. But even a lot of people who are younger, there's been so much overuse of the drugs, and SSRIs and things like that. So I just think, like, there's so many endocrine disruptors around us, and that's a huge part of the chronic anxiety. And so all of this, obviously, like, I hear people constantly talk about fear porn, and, people have been pointing out fear porn and channels that, all of this stuff on the internet, a lot of it, like, Alex Jones is the most obvious example, of people who are, like, hyping it up, and ramping people up. And I don't think most of that is technically fear porn. I think technically it's anxiety porn. Fear and anxiety are two different things, and people really should discern between the two, because really anxiety is far more subjective. and far more about what's going on in your head and your internal dialogue. Whereas fear is like brings you right into the moment, right down into the physical. Like usually fear is far more it's far more acute, and like real fear is not what people are feeling when they're just surfing the internet and watching some Alex Jones videos about Jade Helm or whatever. People are being drummed up into high anxiety, and in a way people become kind of addicted to anxiety, and their anxiety, that's why it's fear or anxiety porn, is because people are constantly coming back to it for more to get like this biochemical, they're getting a biochemical rush from it. I know, I've been there many times. I think there's a lot of different channels out there, especially the big ones that are designed to create anxiety for people. They don't really, oftentimes they're offering plenty of truth and plenty of insights, but there's a tone to it. There's a way to approach these things, because honestly, if you get rid of all the noise that the anxiety is making in your head, and if you clear up and sort of allow yourself to get beyond the anxiety, you're going to have a much clearer vision of what you should really be afraid of and what is truly a threat, and especially in the more immediate sense. And, I'm not saying like things like Fukushima and CERN are not a threat that you should maybe have some gut level instinct of fear about, because fear is your ally when you're really checking in with your gut. This doesn't feel right, there's some kind of fear there, and there's negative energy at least. And that's the thing, like I think without like this chronic anxiety created by the mind so much, what we'll find is that the actual listening to the gut is going to be much clearer, because that's how I've felt. And since then, my solar plexus has stopped having chronic tension. And yeah, I can hear myself right now. I sound a little bit hoarse. I'm still like, I got over a cold, and it just kind of destroyed my voice for a while there. So excuse my kind of nasal. I'm nasally on the best of days. When I started to address anxiety and started to observe the way that my own mind works, the recursive nature of the mind starts to become apparent. And the fact that you can think about yourself thinking, and then you can think about yourself thinking about your thinking, and so on and so forth. And oftentimes, really, if we had like if you transcribed your inner dialogue, what you might find really is that it's very repetitive. And oftentimes the thoughts that are causing you anxiety are those repetitive thoughts of like, I'm never gonna, or I can't do this, or but I think in tackling the chronic anxiety about like, what am I doing every day, I used to have anxiety about how I look, like high anxiety when I was young about like, what am I going to wear, and like, how do I look? That's the kind of like cultural mind control that's just eating away at everybody. And it's like we don't get enough of that. We have to go on the internet and look for anxiety, and basically people really focusing a lot on subjects that really kind of like just make them feel overall totally uneasy, but more so oftentimes subjects that are bringing up cognitive dissonance in people. I notice a lot of people people transfer their anxiety and doing videos and like Alex Jones is still, I'm going to use him as the most obvious example. He just is constantly discharging anxiety, emotional, like you can tell by his whole physiology how much anxiety he has. Like he looks like the poster child for adrenal burnout. He's all bloated and he looks terrible. He's aged really badly. Obviously he's discharging that whole entire vibe in a lot of his work. That's what a lot of people have the biggest problem with him, and that's why he gets the fear porn label. And so it just seems to me like there's a lot of that going on, and I don't know, I don't take it on the same way that I used to. And I think part of it too is when you get into the whole recursive mind thing and you start to realize that maybe a lot of what's going on with like trauma and abuse is that people are dissociating when they should be observing themselves. And so, like, I was listening to Kathy O'Brien, you know, and I have a lot of thoughts on Kathy O'Brien and her whole story, and Mark, her husband, handler dude. Like, I have a lot of thoughts about that, but I will say I do think that she's for real. I mean, she said a lot of things that make a lot of sense, and she talked about how in her recovery process, coming back to her happy mind so that, you know, the recursive inner dialogue becomes a lot more positive. It takes a while to switch over to re-entrain your mind to have a inner dialogue that's freer, and, you know, this whole freedom of thought issue. I mean, it's like that's the problem of our age. And honestly, like, she talks about how she did a lot of writing. Like, she had to write out her memories and just keep writing. And so the mind automatically has to observe itself when it's writing. And really, trauma and abuse disable the conscious mind and open the subconscious wide open. And that is part of, like, why we end up with these recursive patterns embedded in us, because trauma will do that. You know, like, when I got hit by the car on that bike, it's like, now it's like a recursive pattern of you know, kind of anxiety and negativity about riding a bike. That's how it is. And so a lot of people don't even know, like, how a lot of their, too, you know, I mean, some of it, the other part of it is sometimes it's just, like, what we're focusing on and how we're focusing on it. Because I can approach a lot of this subject matter now without feeling anxious about it. Really, oftentimes, too, I think anxiety, the core of anxiety, is that what's going on in your mind and your perceptions does not match what's actually going on around you. That seems to be a key factor. I see a lot of anxiety in certain types of people, especially religious people of all kinds of religions, you know. I see a lot of anxiety in people who are not doing what they want to do in life. If you're coming up against all kinds of obstacles and you have, you know, a shitty job, and all of that has, in the past, that's been a huge source of anxiety for me. When I'm not eating right or exercising, I notice I have more anxiety. It's kind of really, the anxiety has everything to do with your relationship with yourself and your own mind, more than action, and really to be discerned from fear, which has everything to do with your relationship with the outside world and what's threatening you, coming at you. I will say, you know, sometimes people do fear the contents of their own mind and they have like a meltdown over it, but really generally we're all like, we're focusing anxiety on the outside world when really we shouldn't. We should focus on the anxiety, the real source of the anxiety, which is internal. And then the outside world stuff, we can approach that knowing that, hey, I'm okay with myself. You know, I'm congruent to the best of my ability. I may not know, I may be wrong about something, but oh well, I'll figure it out. You know, it's like you get a little bit more detached from being so invested. And you're more honest about what is going on around you in objective reality. These are just my observations so far about anxiety. Again, you're not going to get anywhere if you don't do some body work and do some kind of like, make sure that you are as mineralized as you can be. If you're dirt poor, you can still do a lot of different tweaking and changes of diet, and there's a lot of cheap stuff out there that will like be like a lot of superfoods are really not that expensive, and they can totally change your whole energy, especially with you know, being more consistent and daily about it. I guess that's all. This has been a nice long ramble. I'm getting back to these videos, and I've got some more videos on my control plan that are I've got this video that I've been working on for a year. But you know, sometimes I want to get the information as clear as I can instead of just rambling on. But I'll definitely be doing more on the grass videos here. Maybe even get up on the mount. Have a great day, guys.